The exclusive downtown Manhattan lounge was buzzing with the usual sounds of clinking glasses, soft laughter, and the low hum of conversation between the city's elite. Leather chairs, dimmed golden lights, and the aroma of expensive cigars filled the room. It was the kind of place where fortunes were discussed, deals were made, and people like William Bradford felt invincible. A third-generation millionaire, William had inherited his wealth, but made a name for himself in the business world through his investment empire, expanding the family fortune into unthinkable numbers. William, 36, sat at the head of a large mahogany table, surrounded by his closest friends, or rather, the group of men who called themselves his friends. They were all trust fund kids or successful businessmen, just like him. Their conversations often revolved around money, women, and power, and tonight was no different. Their eyes sparkled with arrogance and self-assuredness, the weight of privilege dripping from every word they spoke. As the drinks kept flowing, the conversation turned from their latest business ventures to their personal conquests. "Let me tell you, boys," one of William's friends, Tyler, said, swirling the bourbon in his glass. "I just closed a deal that's going to make me another $20 million this year. Easy. But the real fun? The new model I've been seeing. She's young, hot, and desperate for the kind of lifestyle I offer. Total control." He smirked as the group chuckled knowingly. William, lounging comfortably in his seat, joined in the laughter, though inwardly, he was bored. This was routine for him. There was a predictability in his life, in the way his wealth attracted women, and in how effortlessly he dominated every room he walked into. The conversations, the parties, the women, they all blended into one repetitive blur. That was when Daniel, another member of the group, leaned forward, a sly grin spreading across his face. "I have an idea for a little game, gentlemen," he began, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Something to spice things up. William, how about a challenge for you?" William arched an eyebrow, intrigued but skeptical. Daniel was known for pushing limits, and his games often bordered on the absurd. Still, William leaned in, welcoming the distraction from the monotony. "All right, Daniel," he said, his tone filled with a mixture of amusement and challenge. "What do you have in mind?" Daniel smirked, glancing around the table to make sure he had everyone's attention before continuing. "We've all seen you with your models, your actresses, your high society girls. But what about someone different?" William narrowed his eyes. "Different? In what way?" Daniel took a sip of his drink, letting the moment build before answering. "How about you step out of your comfort zone for once? I'm talking about marrying someone who doesn't fit your typical mold. Someone, let's say, more ordinary. Or even better, someone completely outside of your standards." The room went quiet for a moment as William processed Daniel's suggestion. He could already sense where this was going, but he played along. "Go on," he said, leaning back in his chair. Daniel grinned. "Here's the bet. We pick someone completely random, someone you would never go for. Someone who isn't drop-dead gorgeous, not slim, not part of the social elite. You marry her. Stay married for 6 months. No cheating, no divorce. If you manage that, you win." The others burst into laughter, clapping at the ridiculousness of the idea. But William's competitive nature had already kicked in. He prided himself on being able to manipulate any situation, to bend people to his will. He was certain he could handle whatever challenge they threw his way. "What's the prize?" William asked, feigning disinterest, though he was already hooked. Tyler, still laughing, interjected. "How about a cool $5 million from each of us? You get married to this woman, stay with her for 6 months, and we'll each transfer the money to you. But if you quit early, if you can't handle it, you owe us the same. Deal?" The stakes were high, but for someone like William, it was pocket change. What interested him wasn't the money, but the challenge. The idea of proving to his friends, and to himself, that he could manipulate even the most unconventional situation was too tempting to resist. "All right," William said with a smirk, looking around at his friends. "You've got a deal. Pick someone. I don't care who. I'll marry her." The group erupted into cheers, already excited to find a woman who would be a stark contrast to the glamorous women William usually pursued. They wanted someone who would embarrass him, someone who would challenge his patience and ego. As the night wore on, the men became more focused on the bet. Tyler, always the one to push things further, pulled out his phone. "I've got someone in mind," he said, scanning through pictures he had taken at random places around the city. Finally, he found what he was looking for, a picture of a woman at a local bakery. She wasn't conventionally attractive by their standards, curvy, with a natural face free of makeup, dressed in simple clothes, clearly not a part of their high society circles. Her name was Emma Richards. She was a 32-year-old woman who owned the small bakery where Tyler had taken the picture. Her warm smile in the photo belied a deep inner strength, though the men only saw her as an easy target for their joke. "Here," Tyler said, passing the phone to William. "Meet your future wife." William studied the photo. Emma was everything he normally avoided, someone real, unpolished, with a body that didn't fit the runway model type he was used to. But none of that mattered to him. In his mind, she was just another pawn in a game he intended to win. "I'll have her falling for me in a week," William said confidently, handing the phone back. His arrogance was palpable, and the group laughed, already planning how they would mock him if he failed. The night ended with more drinks and laughter, but as William left the lounge and headed to his penthouse, he couldn't shake the feeling of excitement building inside him. The game was set, and now it was time to play. What William didn't know was that Emma Richards was about to challenge him in ways he never expected. What started as a cruel bet would soon turn into something far more complex, a test not of his charm, but of his character. William Bradford had always been a man of precision. He approached business deals with the same cold calculation as he did his personal life. Every move was deliberate, every word chosen carefully to achieve a specific goal. And now, his latest deal was unfolding. The bet was officially on, and he had to make sure he won. He spent the next few days preparing for the moment he would meet Emma Richards, the woman who, unknowingly, had been selected for the cruel game his friends had concocted. He had already made some calls, gathering basic information about her. She owned a small bakery in the West Village, lived alone, and seemed to keep to herself. She was nothing like the women who usually surrounded him, models, actresses, socialites. No, Emma was different. Real. But none of that mattered to William. She was just the object of the bet, and he would do whatever it took to win. On a sunny Wednesday afternoon, William decided it was time to set things in motion. He dressed down, at least as much as a man like William Bradford could. Instead of his usual tailored suit, he wore designer jeans and a casual blazer, trying to appear more approachable. He'd even left his Rolex at home, opting for a simpler timepiece. The idea wasn't to intimidate her with wealth, at least not at first. As he walked down the quaint streets of the West Village, he spotted the bakery, Emma Sweets. The name was painted in soft pastels above the large bay windows, through which he could see Emma herself, busy behind the counter. She was arranging pastries in the display case, completely unaware of the world outside. She had an air of calm about her, something William found intriguing, even though he would never admit it. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open. The soft chime of the bell above the entrance signaled his arrival, and Emma looked up, catching his eye. For a moment, William felt something unexpected, a slight flutter of nervousness. He quickly dismissed it. He was William Bradford. He could charm anyone. Emma offered a warm, welcoming smile, the kind of smile that felt genuine, something William wasn't used to. He smiled back, though his was more calculated, an expression he had perfected over years of practice. "Hi there. How can I help you?" Emma asked, her voice carrying a gentle warmth. There was no pretense, no expectation. She treated him like she would treat any customer. William walked up to the counter, his eyes scanning the pastries before settling on her. "I'm looking for something sweet, but I'm not sure what to get. Any recommendations?" He injected just the right amount of charm into his tone, careful not to overplay it. Emma chuckled softly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Well, everything here is sweet," she replied, gesturing to the array of baked goods in front of her. "But if you want something special, you can't go wrong with our signature apple cinnamon tart. It's my personal favorite." William smiled, pretending to think it over. "I'll take one of those, then. You seem to know your stuff." As Emma prepared his order, William subtly observed her. She moved with ease, comfortable in her space, and there was a certain confidence in her movements. She wasn't self-conscious about her appearance, and she didn't seem to be affected by the judgment of others. It was a stark contrast to the women in his life who were constantly concerned with how they looked or what people thought of them. It was oddly refreshing. When she handed him the tart, their fingers brushed lightly, and for a brief moment, William felt a spark. He quickly pushed the thought aside, reminding himself of the real reason he was there. "So," he began casually, leaning slightly against the counter, "do you run this place all by yourself?" Emma nodded, wiping her hands on a towel.
"Yep.
"It's been my passion project for the last 5 years. Keeps me busy, but I love it." William raised an eyebrow, genuinely impressed despite himself. 5 years? That's impressive. It must take a lot of work. It does, but it's worth it. I love creating things that make people happy. Plus, I'm my own boss, she added with a playful smile. There was that genuine warmth again. It was disarming. William wasn't used to this. Most of the women he encountered were either trying to impress him or manipulate him, but Emma seemed real, authentic. Still, this was a bet, and he needed to stay focused. "Being your own boss does have its perks," William replied, playing along. "I can relate to that. I run a business myself." Emma looked surprised. "Oh, really? What kind of business?" "Investments," he said simply, trying not to overwhelm her with the scale of his wealth. "I help people grow their money." "That sounds intense," Emma said, her brows furrowed slightly. "I don't know if I could handle something like that. Too much pressure. But I guess someone has to do it, right?" William laughed, though he noted that Emma wasn't fawning over him like most women did when they learned of his success. She didn't seem impressed by money or power. That was unusual. After a few more minutes of casual conversation, William decided it was time to make his move. He couldn't rush things too quickly, but he had to plant the seeds now. "Listen," he began, his tone softening, "I've really enjoyed talking to you. I don't usually meet people like you. Would you like to grab a coffee sometime? Get to know each other better?" Emma looked slightly taken aback by the offer, her eyes searching his face for any hint of ulterior motives. There was a moment of hesitation, but then she smiled.
"Sure.
I'd like that." William smiled back, the victory feeling hollow even as she agreed. This wasn't going to be as easy as he thought, but that was fine. He thrived on challenges, and this was just another one. He would charm her, win her trust, and by the end of it all, he would walk away with $5 million in his pocket. As he left the bakery, tart in hand, William allowed himself a small smirk. The game had begun, and he was confident he would come out on top. But little did he know, the woman he had just met would be the one to challenge everything he thought he knew about power, control, and eventually love. For the first time in years, William Bradford felt something unexpected: uncertainty. He had been confident walking into Emma's bakery, prepared to charm her just as he had charmed countless others before her. But as he left the shop that day, there was a nagging feeling in his chest that he couldn't quite place. It wasn't attraction, not yet, at least. It was more of an unsettled sensation, as if Emma Richards was a puzzle he didn't know how to solve. The bet was simple. All he had to do was marry her, stay married for 6 months, and pocket the money. Easy. He had been through more complex business mergers than this, and he'd manipulated far savvier people than a small-town baker. But there was something about Emma's lack of pretension that threw him off. She hadn't fallen for his charm the way most women did. Sure, she had agreed to have coffee with him, but there had been no starry-eyed look, no sense of awe that typically followed when people learned his name. No matter. The challenge was part of the fun. The next day, William found himself scrolling through his phone, looking at the picture of Emma that Tyler had shown him at the lounge. She looked different in the photograph, less animated, more distant. He compared it to the Emma he had met in person, whose warmth had felt like something tangible. How had she managed to make him feel more seen? It was confusing, irritating even. He put his phone down and forced himself to focus. The plan was already set in motion. He would meet Emma for coffee, make sure she felt comfortable around him, and then escalate things to a point where she would feel like he was genuinely interested in her. Once that was done, proposing wouldn't be difficult. He had 6 months to make it work. 6 months to keep up the charade. And after that, he'd walk away with $5 million and his pride intact. Or so he thought. On the day of their coffee date, William made sure to arrive early. He chose a small, upscale cafe in Chelsea, one that was quiet enough for conversation but still exclusive enough to reflect his status. He ordered a black coffee and sat by the window, checking his watch impatiently. Emma arrived a few minutes later, dressed in a casual yet elegant outfit that seemed to emphasize her carefree nature. Her dark curls bounced around her shoulders as she waved at him through the window, a smile brightening her face. There was something about her energy that was infectious, something William hadn't anticipated. "Sorry if I'm late," Emma said as she slid into the chair across from him. Traffic was a little crazy. William waved it off, flashing his signature smile.
Don't worry about it.
"You're right on time." Emma took a quick look at the menu before ordering a cappuccino, and as she settled in, she glanced around the cafe, clearly taking in the upscale surroundings. "This place is nice," she commented, looking genuinely impressed but not overawed. "I don't usually come to places like this." William smirked. "Well, I thought it'd be a good spot to get to know each other better. A quiet place, you know?" Emma smiled. "Yeah, definitely. I'm more used to local spots, though. Little bakeries and diners. Places with a bit of character." Her eyes twinkled as she added, "But I'm open to new things." There it was again, that unassuming confidence. William was intrigued despite himself. "You must really love what you do, running that bakery." Emma's face lit up instantly. "I do. It's hard work, but I've always loved baking. There's something really satisfying about creating something with your hands and seeing people enjoy it. Plus, it's mine, you know? I built it from scratch." William couldn't relate. He had inherited his wealth, his businesses, his power. He had never built something from the ground up. He had always operated at the top, manipulating pieces already in place. But he nodded, maintaining his charming demeanor. "That's really impressive. Not many people have the courage to start their own business." Emma shrugged modestly. "It didn't feel like courage at the time, just necessity. I didn't really have a backup plan." She paused, sipping her coffee before adding with a laugh, "Guess I'm lucky it worked out." They chatted for the next hour, and William was struck by how easy the conversation flowed. Emma had a way of making him forget about the bet, about the ulterior motives behind their meeting. She was quick-witted, sharp, and refreshingly honest, traits he wasn't used to encountering in his usual circle of friends. It wasn't long before he found himself genuinely enjoying her company. They talked about everything from her favorite books to the challenges of running a small business, and though William kept the focus on her, he realized that she never once pried into his personal life. She didn't ask about his wealth or his family's fortune. She didn't care about his connections or what kind of car he drove. To her, he was just a man she had met by chance, someone who seemed interested in her world. It was a strange sensation for William, who was so used to people fawning over his status. He hadn't realized how tiring it was to always be William Bradford, the millionaire. When the conversation naturally slowed, William glanced at his watch, surprised at how much time had passed. "I didn't realize we'd been here for almost 2 hours," he said, genuinely surprised. Emma smiled warmly, setting her empty coffee cup down. "Time flies when the conversation's good, I guess." For a brief moment, William hesitated. He had planned to move things forward quickly, to speed up the process of gaining Emma's trust, so he could propose as soon as possible. But sitting there, watching her smile, he realized something had shifted. He wasn't ready to push this too fast. Not because he wasn't confident in his abilities, but because, for reasons he couldn't yet explain, he wanted more time. "I'd love to do this again," William said, his voice softer than usual. "Maybe we could have dinner sometime?" Emma's eyes flickered with surprise. "Dinner?" She seemed to consider it for a moment before nodding.
"Sure."
"That sounds nice." "Great," William replied, feeling an unfamiliar sense of relief. He hadn't expected Emma to agree so easily, but the simplicity of her answer caught him off guard. It wasn't complicated, it wasn't forced. It was just natural. They parted ways, Emma heading back to her bakery and William walking toward his penthouse. But as he strode through the city streets, he couldn't shake the sense that he was in unfamiliar territory. This wasn't the bet anymore. Or maybe it still was, but it felt different. Emma was different. For the first time in a long time, William found himself questioning the game he was playing. What had started as a cruel joke between friends was quickly becoming something else. Something he wasn't prepared for. It had been weeks since William's first encounter with Emma, and things were not going as planned. He had expected the bet to be a quick, controlled endeavor, charm her, marry her, stick it out for 6 months, and walk away with his pride and his winnings intact. But instead, something unexpected had happened. He had become comfortable with her. What had started as casual dates, coffee shops, quiet dinners, had turned into longer conversations, inside jokes, and a growing sense of ease that William hadn't anticipated. He was supposed to be manipulating the situation, maintaining control. But lately, when he was with Emma, the thought of the bet would slip away entirely, replaced by a genuine interest in her as a person. That wasn't supposed to happen. It was a Friday evening, and they were walking through Central Park after having dinner at a cozy little Italian restaurant Emma had suggested. The city was alive with its usual energy, but the park offered a brief reprieve from the chaos. The autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet, and the cool breeze carried the scent of the season, making Emma pull her coat tighter around her. "You seem quiet tonight," Emma remarked, glancing up at William. Her expression was soft, genuinely curious. William smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just thinking," he replied, keeping his tone casual. He wasn't lying. His mind had been racing for days, struggling to reconcile his growing affection for Emma with the cruel nature of the bet. His friends still hadn't stopped teasing him, pressing him for updates and reminding him of the $5 million at stake. They were expecting him to marry Emma soon. His next move was supposed to be a proposal, something that would have been easy to do if he had been able to maintain emotional distance. But Emma had changed that. "Thinking about work?" Emma asked, clearly trying to offer him an out from whatever was weighing him down. "Something like that," William said vaguely. It was easier to let her believe it was work stress than to admit the truth. He glanced at her as they walked, and for what felt like the 100th time, he found himself admiring how different she was from the women he usually dated. There was no artifice with Emma, no hidden agenda, no need to impress or be impressed. She wasn't driven by the need for validation from others. She simply existed, content with who she was, and William found that incredibly refreshing. Her confidence wasn't flashy or loud, but it was real, and it drew him in more than any glamorous socialite ever could. As they reached a bench overlooking one of the park's small lakes, Emma sat down, motioning for William to join her. He hesitated for a moment, then took a seat beside her, his hands resting in his lap. "I have to admit," Emma said, breaking the silence, "when we first met, I wasn't sure what to think of you." William chuckled lightly, though he felt a tightness in his chest. "Oh, and what do you think of me now?" Emma's eyes softened as she studied him. "I think you're surprising. You're not like anyone I've ever met. I thought you'd be just another guy who throws money around to get what he wants, but I don't know."
There's more to you than that.
William swallowed, suddenly feeling exposed. He had spent his entire life cultivating a persona of wealth and power. The idea that Emma might see through that facade, see the person underneath, was both terrifying and strangely comforting. "You're giving me too much credit," William said, trying to deflect. Emma shook her head, her smile gentle. "No, I don't think so. I think you just don't see yourself the way others do." William was about to respond when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It was a message from Tyler. "Any updates on the big proposal?" "Time's ticking, buddy." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He stared at the message, his heart sinking. How had it come to this? How had a simple, superficial bet turned into this tangled mess of emotions? He hadn't planned on caring about Emma, hadn't planned on feeling anything beyond the satisfaction of winning. But now things were different, and it scared him. "Everything okay?" Emma asked, noticing the shift in his expression. William slipped his phone back into his pocket, forcing a smile.
"Yeah,
"Just work stuff. Nothing important." Emma nodded, accepting the answer, but there was a slight frown on her face, as if she could sense that something wasn't quite right. They sat in silence for a few moments, the crisp evening air wrapping around them. William could feel the weight of his decision pressing down on him, like an invisible force squeezing the breath from his lungs. He had to make a choice soon. His friends were expecting him to propose. And Emma was starting to trust him. He couldn't keep lying to her. The longer he let this go on, the worse it would be when the truth inevitably came out. But how could he possibly tell her? How could he admit that the entire relationship had been built on a cruel joke, a shallow bet between him and his friends? The thought of her reaction, of the betrayal in her eyes, made his stomach churn. Yet, as they sat together on that bench, watching the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the city skyline, William felt something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Regret. He regretted the bet. He regretted the way he had treated Emma like a pawn in his game. But most of all, he regretted that he hadn't met her under different circumstances. Circumstances where he could have been honest with her from the start. "Emma," William began, his voice lower than usual, "there's something I need to—" His words were cut off by the sudden sound of Emma's phone ringing. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "Sorry, I should take this," she said, standing up. "It's my mom." William nodded, watching her step away to answer the call. His heart was racing, and he felt a deep sense of relief mixed with disappointment. He had been on the verge of telling her the truth, something he had never planned to do. But now, the moment had passed, and he wasn't sure if he'd ever be able to bring it up again. As he sat there, staring out at the darkening water, William realized just how much things had spiraled out of his control. The bet was no longer just a game. Emma was no longer just a challenge to be conquered. Somewhere along the way, she had become someone he cared about, someone he respected. And that changed everything. When Emma returned, her face slightly troubled after the call with her mother, William knew he couldn't keep dragging this out. He had to make a decision. Either he would come clean, tell her everything, and risk losing her, or he would propose and continue the lie for another 6 months, collecting his winnings at the end. But as he looked at her, really looked at her, he realized that no amount of money was worth losing what they had started to build.
No.
He couldn't do it.
He wouldn't.
But how was he supposed to fix this? William had never been so conflicted in his life. His thoughts had become a tangled mess, a battle between what he was supposed to do and what he actually wanted to do. Every time he saw Emma now, the guilt gnawed at him, eating away at the smug confidence that used to define him. The bet, the game, had spiraled out of his control. Emma had become more than just a means to an end. She had become someone he deeply cared for. But how do you tell someone that you were never supposed to care in the first place? It had been a few days since their evening in Central Park, and William was still haunted by the moment he had almost told Emma the truth. It had been so close. If her phone hadn't rung, everything would have come crashing down. Part of him was relieved, but the other part, the part that had started to genuinely feel something for her, was suffocating under the weight of his dishonesty. Tonight was supposed to be different, though. Tonight, he had decided he would come clean, no matter the consequences. The thought terrified him, and the likelihood that Emma would walk away and never look back was all too real. But after everything, he knew she deserved the truth, even if it meant losing her forever. William paced in his penthouse, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the New York City skyline. His reflection in the glass felt like a stranger, someone he barely recognized. The man staring back at him wasn't the same William Bradford who had laughed with his friends that night at the club. He wasn't the same person who thought winning a bet was more important than treating someone with respect. Emma had changed him, and he knew it. Just as he was preparing to leave, a knock on the door startled him out of his thoughts. He wasn't expecting anyone. With a sigh, he moved to open the door, mentally preparing himself for whatever interruption this was. But when the door swung open, William froze. It was Emma. She stood there, wearing a simple coat and scarf, her expression unreadable. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, and her eyes, usually so warm and inviting, seemed clouded with uncertainty. "Emma?" William asked, his voice betraying the confusion he felt. "I wasn't expecting you. Is everything okay?" Emma took a slow breath before stepping inside, though she didn't move further than the entryway. "I needed to talk to you," she said, her voice steady, though there was an edge to it that William hadn't heard before. He closed the door behind her, his heart racing. Something was off. "Sure," he said, forcing a smile as he gestured for her to sit down. "What's going on?" But Emma didn't sit. She stayed standing, her eyes fixed on him in a way that made William feel like she was seeing through every lie he had ever told. There was a moment of silence before she finally spoke. "Is there something you've been meaning to tell me?" she asked, her tone soft but pointed. William's heart dropped. There it was. She knew, or at least she suspected something. He could feel the walls closing in, every muscle in his body tightening as he realized this was it. This was the moment he had been dreading, and there was no way out. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. How could he even begin to explain? How could he justify the bet, the lies, the manipulation? He felt trapped by his own mistakes. "William," Emma continued, her voice breaking the silence. "I ran into one of your friends, Tyler." She said the name with a trace of disgust, and William winced. "He was at the cafe where I was meeting a friend. We talked briefly, but it was enough for him to say something that didn't make sense to me at the time." William's pulse quickened, panic rising in his chest. His mind raced, replaying every interaction, every smug remark Tyler had made about the bet. Tyler couldn't have said something, could he? He wouldn't, would he? "He mentioned a bet," Emma said quietly, her eyes narrowing. "Something about you winning $5 million if you stayed with me for 6 months. At first, I didn't understand. I thought maybe it was some kind of misunderstanding, but I couldn't get it out of my head. So I asked him to clarify." William could feel his stomach drop. This was worse than he could have imagined. Tyler had told her everything, and now there was no going back. Emma stepped closer, her voice calm but firm. "So tell me, William, was this all just a game to you? Am I just some bet you needed to win?" The silence that followed was deafening. William could barely breathe, his heart pounding in his chest as he searched for the right words, but nothing he could say would make this better. The truth was out, and Emma's hurt was palpable. He had been too late. "Emma," he started, his voice hoarse. I didn't mean for this to happen. It wasn't supposed to be like this." "Then how is it supposed to be?" Emma demanded, her voice rising with anger. "You thought you could just play with my life? That I wouldn't find out? What kind of person does something like that?" William stepped forward, his hands outstretched in a desperate attempt to reach her. "Please, just let me explain." "Explain?" Emma scoffed, her eyes blazing with tears she was clearly trying to hold back. "Explain what? How you used me for a bet. How you thought it was funny to treat me like a joke." "No." William's voice cracked, emotion flooding through him. "No, Emma, it wasn't like that. It started that way, yes, but things changed." "I changed. You changed me." Emma shook her head, disbelief written across her face. "You can't just say that now, after everything. How am I supposed to believe you? How do I know any of this was real?" William could feel his heart breaking as he watched her struggle with the betrayal. "Because I care about you," he said, his voice pleading. "I care about you more than I've ever cared about anyone. That's the truth. The bet. It doesn't matter anymore. I don't care about the money, Emma. I don't care about any of it. I just want you." Emma's eyes softened for a brief moment, but the hurt remained. "But you lied to me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You lied, and I don't know if I can ever trust you again." William felt the sting of her words like a knife to the chest. He had done this. He had ruined everything. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I never meant to hurt you." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension in the room was unbearable, thick with the weight of everything that had been left unsaid for too long. Finally, Emma shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "I need some time," she said quietly, her voice cracking. "I need to figure out how to deal with this with you." Without another word, Emma turned and walked out the door, leaving William standing alone in his penthouse, the silence swallowing him whole. As the door clicked shut behind her, William collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. The realization hit him like a freight train. He had lost her. He had lost the one person who had ever made him feel like more than just a man with money and power. And now, because of his own arrogance and pride, he might never get her back. Days turned into weeks, and William found himself spiraling deeper into a pit of regret and uncertainty. Emma had left his penthouse that night without a word, and though he had tried calling and texting her, she had gone completely silent. For the first time in his life, William felt powerless, truly powerless, not because of a failed business deal or a market crash, but because of the one thing money couldn't fix: trust. He had shattered it. Every day, William replayed the night Emma had confronted him. Her face, the pain in her eyes, the disbelief. He had been so careless, so focused on winning a meaningless bet, that he hadn't seen what was right in front of him. Emma wasn't just a part of the game. She had become someone he truly cared about, maybe even loved. But it was too late. She was gone. And now, all he had left was an empty penthouse and a gnawing ache in his chest that wouldn't go away. His friends had been relentless. Tyler, Daniel, and the others kept calling, wondering why he hadn't proposed yet. They joked about how Emma had been the perfect mark, oblivious to the turmoil William was going through. He didn't want to hear any of it. The bet no longer mattered. The $5 million? Meaningless. He hadn't spoken to his so-called friends in over a week, and the thought of ever seeing them again made him sick to his stomach. William was tired. Tired of the lies. Tired of the facade. Tired of pretending he didn't care about losing Emma. So he decided to do something about it. 2 weeks after their last conversation, William found himself standing outside Emma's suites. He had walked by her bakery a dozen times in the past few days, trying to summon the courage to go inside. He wasn't sure if she'd even want to see him, but he knew he had to try. Through the large glass windows, he could see her working, just as she always did, moving gracefully between the counter and the kitchen, serving customers with that familiar, genuine smile. His heart clenched at the sight. How could he have been so foolish? How could he have risked losing someone like her for the sake of a stupid bet? Taking a deep breath, William pushed open the door. The bell above chimed, and Emma looked up. Her smile faltered when she saw him, her body stiffening slightly. She didn't say anything at first, just watched him with cautious eyes. "Hi," William said softly, his voice almost drowned out by the noise of the bakery. "Hi," Emma replied, her tone neutral, guarded. "I know this is the last place you want to see me," he began, stepping closer to the counter. "But I couldn't leave things the way they were." Emma didn't respond right away. She glanced at the few customers still browsing the display cases, then back at William. "If you're here to explain again, I don't know if I want to hear it." "I understand," William said quickly. "But I'm not here to make excuses. I just wanted to apologize. Properly. I know words don't fix what I did, and I know I hurt you. But I need you to know that I regret it. I regret everything. The bet, the lies, all of it." Emma's eyes softened slightly, but she remained silent. "I've spent these last few weeks thinking about what a fool I was," William continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I was so wrapped up in trying to win a bet, I didn't even realize that I'd already lost the best thing that had ever happened to me. You, Emma. You were never part of a game to me. Not after I got to know you. What I feel for you, it's real. I was too afraid to admit it." Emma crossed her arms, her expression conflicted. "You expect me to believe that after everything?" "I don't expect you to believe anything," William said honestly. "I'm just asking for a chance to make things right. I understand if you can't forgive me. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I want you to know that I'm done with all of it. The bet, the money, everything. I told my friends I'm out. They're not part of my life anymore. I'm done playing games. I just want a chance to prove that to you." For a long moment, Emma didn't say anything. She studied him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of deception. William held his breath, waiting, hoping. Finally, Emma spoke, her voice soft but firm. "I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again. What you did, it hurt, William. A lot. I thought I was getting to know someone real, someone I could depend on. But then to find out it was all based on a lie." She trailed off, her words hanging in the air between them. William's heart sank, but he nodded. "I understand. And if you can't give me another chance, I'll walk away right now. I won't bother you again. But if there's any part of you that believes I can be better, I'm asking for that chance." Emma looked down, biting her lip as she considered his words. When she looked back up, her expression had softened. "You're right. I don't know if I can trust you again, but I think you're telling the truth now. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to give you a second chance." William's breath caught. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying," Emma interrupted, holding up a hand, "that I'm not promising anything. But I'm willing to see if you really have changed. If you can prove to me that you're the man I thought you were becoming." William felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he didn't let himself get too carried away. This wasn't a victory. It was a chance, a small one, but a chance nonetheless. And he was going to do everything he could to prove to her that he wasn't the man who had made that stupid, cruel bet. He could be better. "I won't let you down," William said earnestly, his voice steady. "I'll prove it." Emma nodded, her lips curving into a small, cautious smile. "I guess we'll see." For the first time in weeks, William allowed himself to hope. It wasn't going to be easy, he knew that. There was still so much to make up for. But this was the beginning of something new. Something real. As he left the bakery, William realized that what had started as a bet had turned into the most important lesson of his life. He had learned that love, trust, and respect were worth more than all the money in the world. And with Emma, he had a second chance to build something that truly mattered. Thank you so much for watching this incredible story unfold. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you love the video, please give it a thumbs up to show your support. Don't forget to share it with your friends, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Your subscription really helps us grow and bring you more amazing stories like this one. Let's keep building this community together.